That's right, I'm making a third video about the Arizona Restaurant Association. Because they won't stop lying. And I have so many questions, a near infinite amount of questions about the whole thing. And the Arizona Restaurant Association isn't the only one in trouble this time. Alright, from the top for everyone who may be tuning in for the first time. And this video is a rush job, so it's going to be a little rough. Please temper your expectations. The Arizona Restaurant Association, or the ARA, is pushing SCR 1040, which will cut the wages of tipped workers. In order to drum up some grassroots support, they created a fake grassroots organization called Save Our Tips. This isn't hyperbole or a conspiracy. The president of the ARA, Steve Shukri, literally is the president of Save Our Tips. It's the same people. At a hearing on the bill, an ARA board member, Beth Cochran, pretended to be a waitress to testify against the bill. During said hearing, Republicans at the hearing jeered at real waitresses from Sky Harbor Airport, while pointing at Save Our Tips and calling them real workers.
Because if you don't like the guy, don't work there. If you're not making enough money doing your tips or getting to the tips, don't work there. You can go somewhere else and make a lot of money.
I'm not necessarily convinced that the testimony provided by the unionized airport workers was compelling to me. I would want to hear from the people that are going to be most affected.
It seems to me that except for some of the unions and activist groups that have spoken, it's clear the employees are happy with the situation as it is and want this bill, and the employers want this bill.
I do think that the airport is different than all of the other restaurants, and I understand that Ms. Hornstein was standing up for everybody else, although they were shaking their head and they didn't want you to stand up for them because they're very happy with their current state of play.
As far as I know, people are not being coerced to do their jobs. Maybe they are. I don't think so.
They were amazingly unpleasant, all of them. Okay, so the Arizona House has passed SCR 1040, but the Arizona Senate hasn't done so. But they may do so soon. And the ARA really, really, really wants to cut their workers' wages, so they're going to keep pushing it. And their vehicle this time is TV station KNXV, and reporter Manuelita Beck.
Arizona's minimum wage could be on your ballot again this November, and this time more than once. We know this impacts a lot of you, and it could have a big impact if you work for tips. Manuelita Beck with our political team is finding out what's in those proposals.
If she's with their political team, then their coverage is in trouble because this story is terrible. And it's terrible for a very obvious reason.
I love restaurants, and so being able to be part of one is always really cool. I like talking to people, and so you meet all kinds of people throughout your day.
Sultan Stifo has been a server for 5 years at this restaurant in North Scottsdale.
It's almost like a limitless income based on how hard that you work and how much you can cater to your guests.
Yes, being a tip worker is almost like an infinite money cheat. Although I can very easily think of another job that probably pays a lot more. Who is Sultan Stifo, and why am I absolutely livid that he was chosen as the person to speak for the average tipped worker? Well, this story is presented in a rather lazy fashion. One guy speaks in favor of the bill, another speaks against it, and she interviews Sultan Stifo as the voice of the everyman, a John Q. Public, to cut through the noise and tell us what's really going on. There's one problem with that. Remember when I said the ARA created Save Our Tips, as in the president of the Arizona Restaurant Association was the president of Save Our Tips? That's Sultan Stifo testifying in favor of SCR 1040, while wearing a t-shirt for the ARA's very own Save Our Tips. I wonder where that green shirt went. I'm so curious. They all seemed so proud of them at the hearing. Anyway, let's get back to the news story.
Without the tip credit, Sultan fears we could see service charges, higher prices, or even fewer jobs.
Manuelita Beck, the reporter responsible for this story, I already know you didn't do any research for this story. And if you disagree, you can tell me how out of the tens of thousands tipped workers in Arizona, you somehow chose one of the 2 tipped workers that testified in favor of SCR 1040. And they did it while wearing a t-shirt from an ARA front group. I eagerly await the answer. Back to not doing research, stop talking about hypothetical service charges. The owner of the White Chocolate Grill, a former chairman of the Arizona Restaurant Association, has already applied them at the restaurant you are conducting the interview at. I know this because Sultan Stifo told me and everybody else when he was testifying in favor of SCR 1040.
There's on the receipt at the restaurant that I work at and other restaurants that I go to, we have a nice little surcharge at the bottom called Proposition 204. Every guest who sees that will usually ask me, hey, what's Prop 204? My response to them is, because of this proposition, we had to increase prices, increase wages, and the restaurant wanted to show a transparent way of where that money is coming from.
It feels a little silly to scaremonger about possible service charges when you are sitting in a restaurant that already has service charges.
Without the tip credit, Sultan fears we could see service charges, higher prices, or even fewer jobs.
Also, it's a small thing. He's not a server, he's a head server. I know this because he has put it on his LinkedIn page, which seems like a strange thing to put on your LinkedIn page, but what do I know? I'm a cartoon sock. Anyway, I'm mildly peeved at Sultan Stifo for doing this charade, but the bulk of my contempt is reserved for Manuelita Beck, the reporter who filed this story, and Steve Shukri, president of the ARA. Beck didn't do any research and probably got pitched this story by the ARA and she ran with it. It doesn't speak well for the quality of ABC 15's news department. I'm a cartoon sock and I'm doing a better job. And that brings me to the Arizona Restaurant Association president, Steve Shukri. I will reiterate my question from my previous video: how are you still employed? You created a fake front group that was easily traceable back to you. You had an ARA board member give her actual name while testifying as part of Save Our Tips. And now you get caught using Stifo as a plant. I'm assuming, since I didn't hear any mention of Save Our Tips, you've dumped the group as a concept. That's good, at least from an operational perspective. You don't want to use a group that's been compromised and linked to you. But if you use a person who is widely known as a member of that group, people are just going to trace it back to you. Do you, Steve Shukri, think that people will not connect Sultan Stifo as an Arizona Restaurant Association plant just because he's not wearing a Save Our Tips shirt? Because that seems real dumb. Ugh. I'm trying to make videos about other stuff. I made a video about Louisiana and voting rights on Monday. I'm going to try to make another one about labor laws in Louisiana for next Monday. But instead of focusing on that, I have to deal with the knuckleheads at the ARA every other week. You are my problem children. Don't you have a restaurant week or something to do? Anyway, I'm going to email this video to the Democratic senators in the Arizona legislature and encourage them to speak up against this bill and the corrupt way it's been pushed. I also am going to email the video to members of the ARA board with the question: is Steve Shukri really worth $300,000 a year for this level of incompetence? If you pay that much money, don't you want someone who isn't exposed by a cartoon sock on a regular basis? This is History Sock, and I'll see you at the next committee meeting.